A trap had been set for Princess Charlotte, woven with precision behind palace walls. But one woman uncovered it before it could strike, and the diary she left behind tells the harrowing tale. At Windsor, preparations were already underway for what many in the palace called a defining moment in Charlotte's first major solo engagement. The air was thick with quiet anticipation, but also with something else Anne couldn't quite name at first. As she walked the corridors, reviewing final arrangements, she caught glimpses of hurried staff, exchanging cryptic notes, and whispering just out of earshot. She noticed the stage plan pinned to the wall bore strange, unfamiliar markings. The podium lights, usually soft and flattering, had been recalibrated harshly, and the speech Charlotte had practiced was being reviewed by aides she didn't recognize. Anne's sharp eyes scanned the scene. Every detail bore the fingerprints of something deeply familiar. For a moment, she stood frozen. Then it hit her. These weren't just innocent adjustments. These were the same shadows she had seen years ago, when Catherine nearly stumbled into a carefully laid trap at her own debut gala. Anne's hands tightened as she pieced the clues together, edited scripts designed to trip Charlotte mid-sentence, stage lights set to cast her in unflattering contrast, and subtle changes to her entrance designed to disorient her on camera. She heard the whispers behind her then, faint but enough to chill her spine. She needs to learn her place. It wasn't just carelessness, it was a calculated humiliation. Her shock simmered quickly into quiet determination. The realization that history was repeating itself left no room for doubt. Someone was orchestrating this with intent. And Charlotte, young and unaware, was about to walk straight into their snare. Anne pressed her lips together, steeling herself. Not this time. Not while she still breathed. And as Anne studies the eerie patterns unfolding again, she realizes this isn't just about Charlotte, it's about stopping a royal pattern once and for all. This wasn't the first time. Anne had seen it all before, and she had sworn it would never happen again. As she stood in Windsor, watching the subtle chaos unfold around Charlotte's big night, her mind couldn't help but drift back to another evening, years earlier, when the stakes had been just as high. Catherine's charity gala. It was supposed to be her shining moment, her chance to step firmly into the public's admiration. But behind the perfect smile and the polished speeches, Anne had seen something darker. She could still feel the weight of that memory, lodged in her chest like a stone. That night, Catherine had been set up to fail, and no one but Anne had known it. Her private diary still held the chilling account. She'd written down everything: the quiet conversations she overheard late at night, aides whispering in corners about adjustments to Kate's speech, the cruel smirks when no one was looking, the way lighting plans and stage directions had been tampered with just enough to confuse her. Every page of that diary still carried the fury she had felt, as she pieced it all together, helpless at first, then determined beyond reason. Anne remembered how she had slipped through those same palace corridors with a quiet resolve, her eyes catching every detail others missed. It had been subtle, so subtle even Kate hadn't suspected, but Anne had seen it clearly. The sabotage was designed to shake her confidence, to rattle her poise in front of the world, and Anne had made sure it never succeeded. Without fanfare, without thanks, she dismantled it all. The quiet confrontation, the swift removal of compromised staff, the return of Catherine's speech to its original form was all done in silence. Catherine's triumph had seemed effortless to everyone else, but Anne knew how close it had come to disaster. And now, standing here at Windsor, she could see it all unfolding again. The signatures were identical, different names perhaps, but the same cruel intentions, the same jealous hands crafting a perfect storm to humiliate a young woman finding her place. Charlotte, too, was being set up, and Anne felt the same chill of rage climb her spine. It was more than anger, it was grief. Grief for the fact that even after all these years, even after everything they had endured as a family, the palace still harbored people willing to tear their own apart just to feel powerful. She thought of all the whispered alliances, the quiet rivalries festering just beneath the surface of their perfect image. Anne clenched her jaw as her pulse quickened. If she failed to act now, Charlotte would endure the same cruelty Kate narrowly escaped, and Anne refused to let history repeat. With every hallway whisper and every altered memo, the trap became clearer, and Anne began to quietly hunt the truth. Her steps grew deliberate, her silence heavier, as she slipped from one shadowed corner of the palace to the next. She started attending meetings she was never officially invited to, slipping into the back without announcement, sitting wordlessly as agendas unfolded. Her eyes never left the papers passed across the tables, her fingers subtly tracing over seating charts and timelines while others spoke. And it didn't take long for the cracks to show. The scripts Charlotte was meant to deliver bore strange revisions, phrases that stripped her words of confidence, awkward lines that could easily trip her mid-sentence. One page even contained a section so twisted it would leave her appearing tone-deaf to the very charity she was representing. Anne felt the sharp sting of anger but kept it caged behind her steady gaze. It was there too in the technical plans. She saw how the stage lights, once carefully arranged to flatter and comfort, had been reordered into a harsh, unrelenting glare, perfect for making anyone look overwhelmed. She traced the changes to a name she recognized from years before, one of the very same aides she had quietly reassigned after Catherine's ordeal. That realization burned in her chest, and then came the murmurs, hushed voices that died away whenever she entered a room, but never quite fast enough. She caught one aide smirking as he muttered, "Let's see if she can handle the pressure, best learn now." Another sneered about making her look unprepared, as though this humiliation were some sort of twisted rite of passage. Every word, every edit, every quiet betrayal found its way into her diary, written in a sharp, decisive hand. Page by page, Anne mapped the plan, and what emerged was unmistakable. This wasn't carelessness or coincidence, it was deliberate, calculated. The same dangerous faction that once circled Catherine was now closing in on Charlotte, emboldened by years of silence. And as Anne stared down at the damning notes before her, she felt the full weight of what she was up against, an enemy that thrived in the shadows and counted on her to keep quiet. And as the event draws near, Anne knows she has little time left to disarm the trap. It was time to move not with noise, but with precision. Anne entered the lion's den armed only with resolve. All day, she had watched the pieces fall into place. The twisted edits, the cruel whispers, the traps hidden in plain sight. And now she knew where it all converged. In the office of the aide who thought himself untouchable. She waited for the halls to fall silent, for the palace to retreat into its nightly stillness. Then she walked, each step deliberate, toward the door she had been watching all week. It opened easily, as though daring her to enter. The air inside was thick, with a smug kind of order papers stacked neatly, a single pen aligned just so. But Anne's eyes immediately went to the pile of documents on the desk. There it was. The speech, heavily marked with malicious edits, stripped of meaning and clarity. The lighting instructions scrawled to sabotage the stage. The floor plan, altered just enough to disorient. All of it laid out brazenly, waiting to deliver Charlotte to humiliation. She didn't touch anything. Not yet. She simply stood there, in the quiet, the weight of her decision sinking deeper with every breath. Minutes passed. Then she heard the faintest footsteps returning. The aide stepped in, unknowing, and froze when his eyes met hers. Anne didn't flinch. She didn't raise her voice. Her gaze cut sharper than any shout. Slowly, she lifted the speech from the desk and held it out. Her words were low, controlled, and devastating. "Tell me this was a mistake." The aide's face paled. He stammered, denying what she already knew, offering excuses that dissolved before they left his lips. But Anne didn't need confirmation. She had seen this game before, and she recognized a lie before it was even spoken. She let him scramble, let his panic hang in the air, then calmly gathered the evidence herself, every sheet of paper, every damning note. Without another word, she turned and walked out, leaving him standing there in silence, shattered by the quiet force of her resolve. Her silence was more powerful than anger, more final than any threat. With the evidence in hand, Anne locks it away and prepares to rewrite the ending once again. Anne knew exactly what to do, and she would not fail her niece this time. The moment she walked out of that office with the damning documents in hand, her plan took shape. There was no hesitation, no second-guessing. By dawn, the palace machinery was already moving under her quiet command. She summoned two of the most seasoned veterans from her own trusted circle, replacing the compromised staff overnight with professionals who owed loyalty to no faction, only to the crown. No one argued, no one dared. Her authority carried a weight that silenced even the boldest whispers. Then she turned to the stage itself. With unflinching focus, she walked every inch of it, inspecting the lighting from every angle, correcting the positions until the glare softened into something dignified, something that would flatter Charlotte instead of breaking her. She checked the sound system personally, leaning close to the technician, her sharp words ensuring there would be no mysterious glitches when the world was listening. Every loose end was tied, every sabotage erased as though it had never existed. But she didn't stop there. Anne sat alone with the original speech in her hands, her fingers smoothing the familiar pages before slipping them back into their folder. When she handed it to Charlotte later that morning, the girl's smile was bright and unsuspecting. They rehearsed quietly together, Charlotte's voice steady and warm, each word landing just as it should. She was radiant, and she didn't even know how close she had come to disaster. At rehearsal, Charlotte moved through her lines flawlessly, confident and composed. The audience that would soon fill those seats would see nothing but grace and strength, and Anne, standing silently in the shadows, watched it all unfold. Every detail she'd fought to preserve now shimmered in her niece's effortless performance. But Anne didn't smile. Not yet. She simply studied her, ensuring nothing, not a single word, not a single step was left to chance. But as the final night arrives, Anne realizes she must also shield her from something more dangerous. The truth. Some truths protect, and some truths destroy. Anne decides which this will be. Long before the final night descended, Anne had already made her choice. William would never know. Not now, not later, not ever, just as he hadn't known the truth about Catherine's gala years earlier. It wasn't distrust that kept her silent. It was a strategy. Anne understood the fragility of this family better than anyone alive, and she knew that one wrong word could unravel it all. She could picture it perfectly, William's anger erupting the moment he learned of the sabotage. His voice rising, his fists clenching, his instinct to protect stronger than his sense of caution. And then the inevitable fallout. Questions, accusations, headlines. The entire affair twisted into something public and grotesque before it could be quietly put to rest. The thought of Charlotte's name dragged into that chaos filled Anne with quiet dread. Her mind drifted back to that night after Catherine's gala, how William's eyes had glowed with pride as he told his wife, "You were born for this." Anne had stood just out of sight, watching, guarding that tender moment from being spoiled by the truth. And even now, she remembered how much it had mattered that his memory of the night remained untainted. How it had given Catherine the confidence to step forward without ever second-guessing her place. Anne feared what would happen if he knew. He would question everything about his staff, his trust, perhaps even himself. Worse, it would seep into Charlotte's heart too, making her believe her triumph wasn't fully hers. That every word she spoke, every graceful move she made, had been engineered by someone else. That kind of doubt, Anne knew, was the most corrosive of all. So she bore the weight herself. Later, in the solitude of her quarters, she opened her diary and wrote in deliberate, steady strokes, "My silence is a gift to them both." The words settled over her like a vow, unyielding and final. And so Anne carries the burden alone, knowing the cost of her quiet guardianship. Behind the glittering facade of the monarchy, quiet battles rage, and Anne has seen the battlefield before. It became impossible to ignore. Even as she fought to secure Charlotte's night, Anne could feel the undertow of something deeper, something that stretched beyond one event and one girl. The air in the palace carried an unmistakable tension, a sharpness in glances exchanged, in words left unsaid but understood. She watched closely as familiar lines hardened. Camilla's circle, calculated and entrenched, whispering at the edges. And on the other side, those drawn to Catherine's calm resolve, quietly rooting for her, and by extension, for Charlotte. These weren't just rivalries of personality anymore, they had hardened into factions. Every move against Charlotte now made sense in this broader light. It was not just jealousy of a child's moment in the sun, it was strategy. A small but deliberate strike in a quiet war for influence and survival. Those who had once undermined Catherine now sought to contain Charlotte before she could even rise. To Anne, the patterns were bitterly familiar. She'd seen them tear through Diana's time, seen them weaken Charles at his lowest. And yet here they were again, just as ruthless, just as willing to sacrifice one of their own for the illusion of control. In her diary, she recorded all the names, whispers, and actions. Every entry is a testament to how these rivalries thrived in silence. She documented how senior aides favored one camp over the other, how appointments were quietly weaponized, how loyalties shifted like sand underfoot, and as she wrote, the truth cut deeper. This wasn't just about protecting Charlotte anymore. This was about protecting the monarchy from itself. Anne knew that unity was not just ceremonial, it was the lifeblood of the crown. And yet she could feel it fraying in her hands, threatened by petty ambitions hiding behind velvet curtains. That realization left her more determined, but also more weary. Because with each passing hour, The fight to shield Charlotte felt less like a single act of loyalty and more like one front in a far larger, more dangerous war. But as Anne turns her gaze inward, she begins to question her own role in this silent war. Every line she wrote carried weight, and Anne wondered if the truth was too heavy to ever share. Alone in her quarters, she sat with the diary in her hands, feeling the gravity of every word within it. The pages were no longer just a record, they were evidence. Proof of betrayal, of loyalty, of everything the world was never meant to see. And for the first time, she questioned whether the truth should even survive her. She ran her fingers over the spine and wondered if it would be kinder to burn it, to erase every trace of what had happened, and leave nothing but silence behind. Yet she hesitated, because written truth has its own strange power, a double-edged sword. In the right hands, it could stand as protection, a shield for Charlotte and Kate, should the palace ever turn on them again. But in the wrong hands, it could become a weapon, used to divide, to harm, to destroy the very ones she fought to protect. That thought alone sent a chill through her, and she closed the book tightly, almost as if to keep its secrets from leaking into the room. Part of her, though she would never admit it aloud, longed for Charlotte and Kate to one day find the diary, to open it and finally understand how close they had come to ruin, how she had shielded them with her silence. There was a strange comfort in imagining them discovering her words years from now and knowing the depths of what she had done for them. But that comfort was fleeting, replaced quickly by fear. Because what if knowing poisoned their triumph? What if they read her confessions and felt diminished, as if their success had been staged, their confidence just a fragile illusion? She could not risk it. Not yet. With a deep breath, she stood and slid the diary back into its drawer, locking it away once more. The final line she'd written that night stayed with her, echoing in the quiet. Some legacies are meant to stay silent. And yet, in her heart, Anne knows her quiet vigil has become the most important chapter of her own story. Some heroes never stand in the spotlight, but without them, the stage would collapse. Anne stood just beyond the edge of the crowd, her presence unnoticed, her contribution invisible. All eyes were on Charlotte as she stepped into her moment, poised and radiant, her voice unwavering, her words falling like polished stones into the silence of the room. The applause that rose afterward was thunderous, but Anne remained still, her heart swelling not with pride in herself, but in the quiet knowledge of what she had preserved. It struck her then how fragile that dignity truly was, how easily it could have been shattered had she not intervened. Every choice she made, every sleepless night spent rewriting the sabotage into triumph, had safeguarded not just Charlotte's grace, but also Catherine's legacy and the monarchy's delicate stability. It was more than saving a speech or a single evening. It was saving the image of an institution that depended on its women standing unbroken in the face of quiet wars. And in Charlotte's determined gaze, Anne caught fleeting glimpses of her own younger self. A girl who had once walked those same corridors with no one to shield her from the shadows. She remembered wishing, all those years ago, that someone would have stood for her the way she now stood for them. That memory stung, but it also hardened her resolve, for if her pain had taught her anything, it was that true loyalty demands no recognition. Later that night, as the palace slipped back into silence, Anne returned to her quarters and opened her diary one last time. Her final entry was short, written with deliberate precision. "They will remember her smile, but I will remember why it stayed." The words felt heavy, yet right in acknowledgement of the quiet power she had wielded and the invisible shield she had become. She closed the diary slowly, feeling its weight settle in her hands, and locked it away where only she would ever find it. Then, with the faintest whisper to herself, half a promise, half a farewell, she murmured, "Some battles are won in silence, and that is enough." Thanks for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in the next one.